Hello and welcome to the latest edition of the Defence Side podcast. Today, myself, Tim Ripley and Francis Tusser will be looking at the subject of the British Army. Is it ready for war? Is it unprepared? Is it in trouble? Francis, discuss, as they say on various debate programmes.
Well, and some of this is, in inverted commas, not news. It's been known about, it's been written about. But you look at the range of capability gaps that the British Army has, the likely timeline when they could be filled in and so forth, things are looking pretty bad. Most recently, as will be on Defence Eye website later this afternoon, there was a written answer in the House of Commons where the new Minister for Defence Readiness, Luke Pollard, basically said that the two war-fighting divisions would be declared to NATO as ready in 2035. Now,
10 years' time.
In 10 years' time. And as we both heard when we were at DSEI, the new First Sea Lord, the first non-Royal Navy officer to be First Sea Lord, General Gwyn Jenkins, his plan was to make the Royal Navy warfighting capable within 4 years. So what the hell is going on with Army planning that basically they're saying it's going to take a decade? Now, I'm all in favour of realism, not saying, we can do it in 6 months. You can't. But a decade. Most of Britain's allies, Finland, the Baltic states, Poland, they're saying they need to be ready for, confrontation in Russia in 2 to 3 years.
We've been in this game for quite a while, and there's a very specific genre of story about British Army equipment we call a crap kit story, where we hear about all the problems and delays and technical problems, all this sort of stuff, the snafus that end up in those National Audit Office reports. So all of that's in play here. We'll talk about that in a minute. But there's also some other stuff going on, isn't there? We've got, is the government allocating enough money to pay for this equipment? And also, is the British Army as an organisation psychologically prepared and organised to engage in a full-up conventional war? For 20-odd years, it's had its head in counterinsurgency, expeditionary warfare. Has it actually got its head around going to war large scale? So let's talk about
taking that last point. If you were to speak to anyone who is in and out of Andover on a regular basis,
that's Army headquarters where it's all run from.
It is absolutely indisputable that the Chief of General Staff, General Sir Ely Walker, and his command team, their heads are completely around, a high-end warfighting. The problem is, and I can't remember who first coined it, the mattress mice. Basically, the majors and colonels in staff posts, a couple of levels below, they see what the seniors have written, they've said, and they put their own interpretation on things. Bearing in mind, and this apparently is something which senior army leaders have said in meetings, there are more ceremonial artillery pieces in service, as it were, than there are actual artillery pieces for the regular army. The stocks of ammunition, which were highlighted by NATO exercises 2 years ago as being hardly a week's worth, none of this has been rectified. You look at the delivery rates, the production rates of, say, Boxer, and despite the fact that Artec, the consortium that builds Boxer, and working with RBSL, Rheinmetall BA Systems, saying, look, guys, we can actually build these quicker if you want. The Army gone, no, we want 50 a year, maybe 60. There is no urgency.
Well, obviously, the big problem is it's not that the British Army doesn't have money. I mean, we've identified that in their sort of published documents, they're talking about spending £42 billion on equipment and logistics support for the next decade. That's a lot of money. You'd think that would be able to buy you some stuff at scale, but lots of this money is committed into programs and contracts that you can't actually change. It's the proverbial supertanker effect, isn't it?
Yes, but you also raised the point here, Tim. The last datum point we had was the 2023 Defence Equipment Plan. After that, the MOD, led by its Permanent Secretary David Williams, said, we don't feel this is useful. We're not going to publish this anymore, despite the fact it was originally mandated by Parliament. And that's where the £42 billion figure comes from, where £29 billion was for procurement, well over double the previous figures, and then the rest was equipment support. Yes, You ought to be able to buy a completely new army for £29 billion. And not in 10 years. You ought to be able to do it if you put your mind to it. You should be getting deliveries in, well, if you went to, say, Krasnodar and said, right, I want Leopard 2, here's money, how quickly can you do it? The answer is 26 months. And actually, some of those delivery times are coming down. Again, you're left with this written answer saying, yeah, we'll be ready by 2035. And you're just going, I suspect that money, the 42 billion equipment procurement and equipment support, that money's gone. That money has disappeared. It's been taken by other things, I suspect primarily nuclear, AUKUS, and a bit for GCAP.
But the British Army does have quite substantial programmes underway to buy a variety of armoured vehicles, new Challenger 3 tanks, the Ajax family of armoured vehicles, Boxer, RCH 155 artillery piece, also the reinvention of the MRS system, buying in American components. So it does have these things underway, but in each of those programs seem to have their idiosyncrasies that means they're not being delivered at scale or pace to the frontline units.
Completely, absolutely. I think it was yesterday or the day before, there was a press release about the first 2 upgraded MLRS launchers being delivered and stuff there. But at the same time, I've heard that the deep fires budget has been halved. And so a number of GMLRS, guided MLRS rockets, extended range, have been ordered, but it's a relatively speaking pathetically small amount. I have to say, when you start looking at Poland and Finland are the European leaders in terms of what they order and bring in service. But actually, even Germany, which, yes, it's been a laggard in defence spending over the last 20 years, but they're now saying things like Boxer, which they ordered in the 2000s, a few hundred. They're looking at potentially ending up with 3,000 to 4,000 Boxer. And they are looking to set up new mechanised brigades. The Netherlands as well. There's something that doesn't add up in the UK as regards the British Army. If the money is there, why is basically nothing being ordered? And why is everything taking so long? And why, when industry is saying, look, you've asked us to produce 50 Boxer a year, an uneconomic rate, I have to add, and then you suddenly come back and say, oh, could you produce it faster? And industry says, well, yes, it will require money. And the army goes, well, we don't really want to pay more money. So there is some massive disconnect.
I mean, only a few weeks ago, Admiral Radican, the former Chief of Defence Staff, came out with a sort of a blistering attack on MOD bureaucracy and saying they're in perpetual meeting and never actually decide anything. So how do you think this is impacting on these army programmes?
Yes, and I would just recommend anyone watching this, Institute for Government, go onto their website where Admiral Radican gave his valedictory speech. It is excoriating, quite frankly. And the fact that then in question and answer, which was on the record, I should say, he described having Zoom meetings with 20 to 30 civil servants who, quote, had only one thing to say, which was no. And so when you get the Chief of the Defence Staff saying, I'm trying to drive stuff through, and the system is just going, nope, we ain't doing anything, it is a really serious problem. But again, I come back to, if even a quarter of the things Britain's allies in Europe, in NATO, are saying are true, and occasionally, I think it was last year, Denmark said war with Russia in a year, and everyone went, come off it, it's not that bad. But let us just see this type of stuff coming out of, especially the Nordics and the Eastern European countries. They are saying Russia is clear and present danger and is already probing. We collectively in NATO has got to be ready to meet it militarily in a short matter of years. But you then get the official line about the 2 warfighting divisions is not for another decade. What's going on? And I have to say, it leads me to the belief, which I put in the article we're putting up on Defence Eye, that extra funding for the army has been cut. And basically, and I don't envy General Walker, a lot of the things he's planning to do, he's been told just no money and you are not a priority.
15 years ago, 20 years ago, in the height of the Iraq War and the start of the Afghan campaign, the British Army was in an equally difficult position with the roadside bomb threat IEDs, insurgency attacks on British bases, and mounting casualties and public outcry. And the British Army responded, backed up by the Ministry of Defence, and within a matter of months, they had multi-billion-pound equipment programmes underway to re-equip the British Army with mine-protected vehicles, countermeasures.
But from memory, the entire MRAP programme, which was about 2,800 vehicles, weighed in at about 4.5 billion. And it was just, look, shall we say, as a minister, be ready to stand at the dispatch box, maybe not daily, but certainly weekly, mourning the loss of other people, soldiers out in Iraq and Afghanistan, and then being asked, so why haven't they got the equipment? And you raise an interesting point. Why is the army not pointing out to politicians that the Prime Minister, Keir Starmer, faces a very serious probability in the next year or two, if he is still Prime Minister, of having to send British troops into harm's way in the Baltic states and elsewhere, and they will not be equipped or supported to fight the type of conflict they will face. And so the issue of then having to address Parliament and say, well, we just thought they didn't really need artillery ammunition. Who needs ammunition? I don't think the politicians understand this.
So how does the British Army, as an institution, get its message home to those ministers and civil servants, senior officials, that this is a crisis moment? I mean, 20 years ago, it was self-evidently obvious that, dozens, hundreds of soldiers were being killed. Something had to be done. How do we bring that sense of urgency to the situation now?
The problem is, although actually General Walker, because of what he's done in previous jobs, he's very much not been in, since he was a brigade commander, not been in as with the mainstream army, partly because of being special forces and so forth. He has been, should we say, just detached from the army. He ought to be able to stand up and say, I've looked at this. It's all appalling. The problem is a lot of the rest of the army, if a Lieutenant General whatever would say, oh gosh, the state of the tank fleet is awful. And someone would say, didn't you do a 2-year tour of DNS when you were covering armour? Yes. Well, what did you do about it then? So there is a degree of institutional embarrassment that you have actually got to dib on some of your mates and say they made some really bad decisions. Or you have to dib on yourself and say, I really made bad decisions. And so, the fact that the army won't be receiving Challenger 3s till late 2028, maybe later than that. And as also reported in Defence Eye, the fact that it's looking as if they will be significantly heavier than planned and may not be able to use the tactical bridging. You do need to find out who was responsible for these decisions. And you have to point a finger and say, it was him. And it's overwhelmingly him. I mean, this all points to an army that is in possibly being sent to war very soon, but is not quite ready for it. I mean, we saw that back in 1914, when the British Army had success on imperial campaigns, but when it came up against a First Division continental opponent, it struggled. How do you get that mindset back that you are no longer facing insurgents in deserts? You're facing men with snow on their boots in forests. I think if I were to pick, and it's not the only thing, I think there is a problem, and it does stretch across all three services. The mindset is that AI, bring AI in, it will change everything. And so it's not about numbers, it's about agility. You and I, Tim, we've seen these wonderful sheets which go flexible, smaller, agile, even smaller. And one of the things which is perhaps badly understood or just people don't want to recognize is if you are going to go into peer-on-peer competition in war, numbers and size matter. And the idea, don't worry, if we have enough FPV drones, we'll be able to sort it out. Yeah, but if the other side's just driven 1,000 tanks across your forward line of troops, you really are stuffed. And so I think the issue of, we're seeing it in Ukraine. Warfare has changed. No, it hasn't. It is still fundamentally, to use the Blackadder expression, our young people killing their young people. It is about numbers. It's about numbers of kit equipment. And it was Rich Knighton, now the Chief of Defence Staff at DSEI, said there was an amazing, let's call it a paradox about the Ukraine war. We have seen a pace of innovation on both sides, unmatched ever before in warfare, and yet no one has managed to get the upper hand. So technology innovation has been recycled on almost a daily basis, but you still see World War I, trenches, barbed wire, machine guns, no one able to advance. And this, I think, is something which I would say, especially the British Army at the moment, is corporately struggling to understand. And it certainly is not getting the message over to the politicians.
Well, we'll watch with interest over the next few weeks as this issue unfolds ahead of the Defence Investment Plan being unveiled in end of November, beginning of December, when these programs are supposed to be funded and set on their way. And viewers of our podcast will no doubt be interested to join us next time, when we're probably going to look at the Royal Navy and its problems and its issues, which are of a fundamentally different order and have equally intractable issues facing the First Sea Lord, General Sir Jenkins.